The weight of the world is love. Under the burden of solitude, under the burden of dissatisfaction, the weight we carry is love. But we carry the weight wearily, and so must rest in the arms of love at last. Must rest in the arms of love. No rest without love, no sleep without dreams of love. The warm bodies shine together in the darkness. The hand moves to the center of the flesh. The skin trembles in happiness, and the soul comes joyful to the eye. Yes, yes, that's what I wanted. I always wanted to return to the body where I was born.
Good evening. Today's revolutionary is often passé tomorrow, as we all know, and I suppose one of the true tests of creativity and radicalism is the ability to endure through changing times and fashions.
Mr. Allen Ginsberg is, according to the New York Times, quotes, perhaps the most famous and admired contemporary American poet.
My guest tonight is referred to as a survivor. Allen Ginsberg has certainly done that. He was a leader of the so-called Beat generation in the 50s.
But he is known here in America less as a poet than a prophet, the hippie's hippie, the bohemian prototype. Certainly he has worked to cultivate that reputation.
You might say an inspiration to the hippie movement in the 60s, and now in the 70s is in the vanguard of involvement with Eastern meditation.
He is unconventional in all matters. In politics, he is sort of radical, sort of pro-socialist, sort of not quite bright.
All the while, he continues to turn out fresh, distinctive, influential writing.
In appearance, he will wear his hair long until everybody else does, then he will cut it.
Will you welcome, please, Allen Ginsberg?
This is a picture of Louis and Naomi when they were married, probably in 1919, before either Alan or I were born.
I think that's about one of the earliest pictures of myself, before the shit hit the fan. It was really innocent. I love that picture. But I think that's my mother in the background. That's probably my earliest memory. Actually, my mother was in and out of hospitals since before I was born. And in my second or third year also, she had a nervous breakdown. Myself, my brother Eugene, my mother Naomi, in a really good mood, and my father, a high school teacher with his 1930s glasses.
Naomi's influence on Allen was probably in some ways positive, in that she perhaps encouraged in him a sympathy for people in trouble. As emigrants from Russia, my parents escaped a pogrom, and when they came to this country, they believed very strongly in a world of justice and freedom and equality. And Allen must have absorbed these values as he was growing up.
This is on Haleland Avenue in Patterson. I was already kind of self-conscious, and my hair was weird. I was combing it straight back, and with a buck-toothed smile, and some kind of silver glasses, but a kind of pained smile almost. And I think my mother was already in the hospital.
From the very beginning, she was, we were told she had a nervous breakdown, and then she left for about 7 or 8 months, and Al and I were fed at a neighbor's house.
I know Allen felt great deprivation, I knew it not from him, but from the things that my brother Lou would tell us about his difficulties in trying to provide a normal, balanced environment for the children.
My impression of Alan as a child is that he was sort of happy in a way, cherubic, I remember, and he seemed to go from place to place cheerfully. I don't remember any real grief, outward show of grief, as distinguished from the inner grief that he must have felt about Naomi. So that's a remarkable thing.
The extremism of her illness must have left him with very, very bad scars. But they were never apparent in the family situation. He played with his cousins and cavorted on the beach, had a good sense of humor, succeeded in school. He didn't show any evidence of the scars.
As I recall, when I talked to Louis about the relationship of Alan and his mother, and we did talk about a lot, he always felt that Alan bore the brunt of his mother's illness. Louis went off to work, to school. Eugene was off to school, then to the army. Alan was left as the younger son. He was left when his mother was sick. He was told, stay home and take care of Mama. She doesn't feel well. He really bore the brunt because he saw a lot that he should never have seen.
She was paranoid in the sense that she died in a madhouse, thinking that Hitler was after her and my father was after her, and my grandmother was after her. Everybody was after her. So I inherited from my mother a great deal of poetic paranoia. Oh, glorious muse that bore me from the womb, gave suck first mystic life and taught me talk and music, from whose pained head I first took vision. Tortured and beaten in the skull, what mad hallucinations of the damned that drive me out of my own skull to seek eternity till I find peace for thee, oh, poetry, and for all humankind call on the origin, death, which is the mother of the universe. My father was a poet, Louis Ginsberg, member of the Poetry Society of America, and an important minor lyric poet. And I got a good sense of rhythm from him, as well as real familiarity with American poetry of the 20th century, of the lyric style.
The idea was that anyone who wrote had some prestige and would obtain immortality in time to come. That was I think, the interior effect it would leave on both of us, particularly Alan.
This is a poem by Louis Ginsberg, and he wrote it to his sons. He calls it, "To my two sons. My little sons, because I know that love perpetuates but woe, I write these lines so you may read some night in your dark hour of need. As your eyes explore my heart to spy some clue or light or art, for questions nesting in your eyes, my sons, I now apologize."
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ellen. To read my poetry with my son, Alan.
They were both so preoccupied with life, with death, with what's going to be beyond, with relationships mostly, and with the future.
Tears. I'm crying all the time now. I cried all over the street when I left the Seattle Wobbly Hall. I cried listening to Bach. I cried looking at the happy flowers in my backyard. I cried at the sadness of the middle-aged trees. Happiness exists. I feel it. I cried for my soul. I cried for the world's soul. The world has a beautiful soul. God, appearing to be seen and cried over, overflowing heart of Patterson.
was young, I thought it was pretty dumb. So I decided I better be smart and shut up and listen and be sensitive and innocent and shy and goofy, but really pay attention to what other people said. So I listened very carefully, always worried and anxious that maybe I was getting it all wrong or that I was too stupid to understand. And I found that actually the people that were smarter than me were smarter than me, and they had something to tell me, so I heard it.
I was in the Army for about 6 months, discharged. In 1944, I met Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and also Herbert Huncke.
It was midwinter, the beginning of 1946, and a sort of a friendship developed between myself and William, and it was just a matter of time until he introduced me to his associates at Columbia University. And Allen was one of them, and Jack Kerouac was another at that time.
Well, my recollection is that Jack and I went out to investigate your soul. It was like we formed a delegation of two to go up and see if you were as interesting as we'd heard and as interesting as the first impression when you quoted Shakespeare. I had a recollection that we both really worshipped you or respected you and thought you were real interesting and dignified and strange and weird, but intelligent. Jack said, Bill's the most intelligent man in America. Well,
William Burroughs seemed to me that he was a little too old for Allen. That's the way I always felt.
His father, Louis Ginsberg, disapproved of me. He thought of me as sort of a decadent millionaire or something like that, corrupting his son with sort of subversive ideas. You see, at that time, Allen was very much still in the grip of conformity.
I had discovered some of Allen's, I suppose one would refer to them as weaknesses, or rather, let's say, his lack of self-assurance, his feeling of inadequacy at times.
I was not yet out of the closet as far as being gay, as you may remember.
Yes.
I didn't say anything about it, but just sat there with a sort of Cheshire cat smile or some kind of a adolescent smile on my face.
Well,
trying to look
yes,
smart.
I think you were still very much more or less a conformist.
Yes, yeah. But so it wasn't until I met Kerouac at Columbia. He was actually the first person I told.
Jack Kerouac was a handsome one. All the ladies liked him. And he sort of always had a little bit of a twinkle in his eye.
He was staying over in my room, and he was in the bed, and I put a mat on the floor, and I was on the floor, and we were up late talking very intimately, and finally, lying there in the dark, I just started saying, well, you know, Jack, something I should tell you. I really love you, and I don't know what I said, but I remember him groaning, because he loved me, too. Not that way, but a great deal of affection for me. But at least so much affection for me that at least I could talk to him.
So Burroughs had quite a bit of analytic experience. And so he sat in a chair and I lay down on a couch about an hour a day. And Kerouac did also. We both did. And I was very shy, but slowly began unburdening myself and beginning to open up to Bill. And finally, I do remember talking about my family and a feeling of desolation, maybe relating to my mother's madness and being left alone, and finally burst into tears saying, nobody loves me. It would have been something I would have been very embarrassed to admit to myself or to anybody, so I was glad I was able to admit it to myself and get to the ground of my own, lack of self-confidence. And then I realized how close, actually, he was to me later, and how much Kerouac really cared for me. And it became a kind of a supplementary family, because I did have a family, but this was a new family that understood where I was at, both as gay, and also as artist, and also as trembling, lonely individual.
I remember one apartment on Amsterdam Avenue. Allen introduced me to Bill Burroughs, And then Cassidy came in, and he was very frenetic and very charming, and he was accompanied by different women at different times.
Cassidy was sort of a stable, heterosexual, macho, powerful, gentle, generous fellow. And his own sex life was sort of human and average G.I. Joe American. And I realized he was as crazy as I was, and mine was no weirder. I was very virginal at the time. And one day we were thrown together in bed at 4 a.m. by accident in Harlem with no place else to go, no place else to sleep. And I remember being a little scared, not knowing quite what to do, so I sort of like turned over and stiffened my body, and I got on the edge of the bed, and he realized that I was just shy. So he put his arm around me and pulled me in and put my head on his breast. And, you know, he drew me in and gave me love, actually. At a time, I think I was 19 already and still scared of feeling with another person. Still scared of admitting feeling, actually. So once I told the Burroughs, the rite of passage was all over and the world became normal again. I wasn't scared of anybody anymore because I realized that I'd already broken through out of my own privacy and solitude with Kerouac and a whole community of friends, Burroughs, most of whom, people who were not gay necessarily or queer, as the word was in those days, but who were human.
Living up at Columbia, we were wandering down Times Square and hanging around the all-night cafeterias. I was writing for Kerouac's ear primarily by that point because we were close friends and I was trying to imitate his style or appeal to his intelligence. And I was writing for Burroughs' ear. They were the people I was hanging around with and living with. And so they heard my private, personal Allen Ginsberg soul talking. Hunky was the Virgil in that situation. So we were interested in the details of the neon lights above the giant buildings on Times Square, the sort of apocalyptic red glow in the skies over the electric metropolis.
I had come back from jail for withdrawal. They had picked me up on the street and found in my possession 1 bag of heroin, and was really in a rather bad situation financially and every other way, more or less living permanently on the streets, getting by in whatever manner I could.
So Alan was the one who was taking care of him. And then Hunky brought in some friends of his who used the place as a base for stolen goods. And that's when Alan got himself into trouble. They were taking Alan up to Eugene's, to his brother's home, with his records, with a lot of his journals. And they used a stolen car. They kind of went up a one-way street the wrong way, and the police picked them up, and that's when everything blew.
They unearthed the journal Alan had written, and I think they derived from that that Alan was just a little nuts, brilliantly nuts, but a little nuts, and that actually he wasn't really totally responsible for his actions, that actually he wasn't the central mover of these thefts. So as a condition of his being discharged without any conviction, he was asked to go to a psychiatric institute, which I think he wanted to do anyhow because he realized that he was having psychological problems.
I mean, I got letters from him from there, and it seemed to me that he was being sort of brainwashed and said that maybe bureaucracy was true reality and that I was just off on some sort of a tangent. And I thought, well, this is unfortunate because it looks like they're really just taking him over and forcing him back into the mold.
And from there, he came to us when we were married in 1950.
My father and I met, and my father told me first that they had found he was a near genius based on his IQ, and second, my father told me he was a homosexual. And I was rather astounded about that because I had no inkling of that, and rather saddened by it.
Alan was then about 24 years old.
afraid that many people today who were not alive in the 50s have a very vague idea of what the 50s were like. Because we were living in what Eisenhower himself called the beginning of a military-industrial state, except he left off one word, military-industrial corporative state, a state of corporations that were feeding the military-industrial complex. People on the streets, if they were of any position, were white men wearing gray suits, and they had crew cuts. People lived in tract houses and drove cars that we think of as looking quaint or as looking like Americana today, the little Buicks with the ring on the front with a little arrow going through it, which is somewhat symbolic of the times, maybe, the beginning of some kind of missile consciousness. And we were beginning to build our nuclear weapon arsenal out of control. And young men were looked upon as cannon fodder to be sent to the Korean War and to kill Asians for the rights of American property or to stop some incredible domino theory. It was a time of intense psychic pain because of the alienation and the depolarization into two groups that was taking place. Those who still wished to maintain their feelings against the growing one-dimensionality, and the majority of people at that time who had bought the whole thing as they saw it presented to them in television, the American dream. And we were very poor. As young poets, we were not privileged in any way.
The painting is by Robert Levine, who was a friend of Peter Orlovsky. Peter had been living with Robert Levine when I met Peter originally, a few blocks away from the cafeteria, and we all came down every evening to drink coffee and talk and sketch and write poems about each other.
I met Peter through Robert Levine, and he said he was a painter. So I ambled up the hill with him and went into this big old Victorian house, and there was a huge painting on the wall of a beautiful naked boy seated on a Greek couch. And my heart sank when I saw the picture. It was, who is that? And then Peter walked into the room, looking as beautiful as the painting, very shy, but very friendly. So we immediately got into conversation. And so I approached Peter later on, and the next day or something like that. But Peter and I finally got together after a long indecision. Did we really want to commit to each other? And I remember once we decided we were to sit in a cafeteria downtown and took a kind of marriage vow, or vowed to remain with each other and make sure that we each got into heaven and not go into heaven without each other's presence. So I was about 28 and Peter was about 21 or 2. But I remember when we made this vow of celestial, heavenly, earthly, immortal fidelity, that once I realized he was making it and I was making it, there's something broke open, and it was like the heavens showered with gold, that finally I found somebody that loved me as I loved them, and the first time I felt accepted in my life completely. Peter had some other similar sense of an opening of soul.
This being 1955 or 56, On the Road by Kerouac was written already. Neil Cassidy had been the heroic prototype for the hero Dean Moriarty. At the time, everybody knew that Jack was a big angelic genius. He'd already written On the Road and Dr. Sax and Subterraneans and Mexico City Blues and Visions of Cody and many other works by 1955. And we'd all read them, so we knew it. It was about the same time as this painting was conceived that Lamantia, McClure, myself, Philip Whalen, Gary Snyder, with Kenneth Rexroth as a moderator, got together and gave a reading at the Sixth Gallery in San Francisco, where I first read Howl, Kerouac in the audience, with Neil Cassidy in the audience, and presented here before the public for the first time like a united front of pure angelic poetry.
Howl for Carl Solomon. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night, who poverty and tatters and hollow-eyed and high set up smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold water flats floating across the tops of cities, contemplating jazz, who bared their brains to heaven under the L and saw Mohammedan angels staggering on tenement roofs illuminated, who passed through universities with radiant, cool eyes hallucinating Arkansas and Blake Light tragedy among the scholars of war, who were expelled from the academies for crazy and publishing obscene odes on the windows of the skull, who cowered in unshaven rooms in underwear, burning their money in wastebaskets and listening to the terror through the wall, who got busted in their pubic beards returning through Laredo with a belt of marijuana for New York, who ate fire in paint hotels or drank turpentine in Paradise Alley death, or purgatoried their torsos night after night.
I think Hal was closer to my own experience and a kind of contemporary tone that I liked. And it had that anger in it that attracted me even before I knew that I was angry myself. I think that's what tuned a lot of people into that voice, because it was a voice of young people, you know, protesting the kind of disgusting, you know, anti-humane culture that we had grown to adulthood in, that we were growing to adulthood in.
And stand before you speechless and intelligent and shaking with shame, rejected, yet confessing out the soul to conform to the rhythm of thought in his naked and endless head. The madman, bum, and angel beat in time, unknown, yet putting down here what might be left to say in time, come after death, and rose reincarnate in the ghostly clothes of jazz in the gold horn shadow of the band, and blew the suffering of America's naked mind for love into an Eli, Lama, Lama Sabachthani saxophone cry that shivered the cities down to the last radio with the absolute heart of the poem of life, butchered out of their own bodies, good to eat 1,000 years.
I do recall that the poem had an immense effect on me, and I felt immediately that Ginsberg was at the least a major poet, maybe a genius. I just had never read any poetry that was that charged, that intense, that extraordinary, and I knew he was going to make a revolution in the consciousness of his time.
To me, the most useful aspect of Alan's work has always been its social protest. That is, its stand against the degeneracy of society and the attempt to transform that society.
So around sometime in 1959, I was out talking with a friend who was well-versed in Jewish lore, and he read me the Kaddish prayer. And I was hearing a lot of Ray Charles, and like the musicality of it got me, both Ray Charles, I Got a Woman, and the Kaddish rhythm. And when I got home, it was very early in the morning, and I sat down and started writing. And I just kept writing all through the day and the night and the next day.
Alan was affected by his mother because he saw a lot that he should never have seen. And I learned a lot more about what Alan had seen and how he felt when I read Kaddish.
Kaddish for Naomi Ginsberg, 1894, 1956. Strange now to think of you, gone without corsets and eyes, while I walk on the sunny pavement of Greenwich Village, downtown Manhattan, clear winter noon, and I've been up all night, talking, reading the Kaddish aloud, listening to Ray Charles blues shout blind on the phonograph, the rhythm, and your memory in my head 3 years after, and read Adonaius's last triumphant stanzas aloud, wept, realizing how we suffer and how death is that remedy all singers dream of. Sing, remember, prophesy, as in the Hebrew anthem or the Buddhist book of answers, and my own imagination of a withered leaf at dawn. dreaming back through life, your time and mine accelerating toward apocalypse. The final moment, the flower burning in the day. Well, this poem is, in a sense, addressed to the dead. Now I've got to cut through to talk to you as I didn't when you had a mouth. So, in that sense, written for, well, what, the memory of the dead in the living mind. To settle with the dead, certainly. And back to Greystone, where she lay 3 years. That was the last breakthrough. Delivered her to the madhouse again. On what wards? I walked there later, oft. Old catatonic ladies, gray as cloud or ash or walls. Sit crooning over floor space, chairs, and the wrinkled hags a creep, accusing, begging my 13-year-old mercy. Take me home. I went alone sometimes looking for the lost Naomi, taking shock. And I'd say, no, you're crazy, Mama. Trust the doctors. This is in Greystone State Hospital, actually, in a very plain plaid dress, I think given out at Greystone or brought to my mother to keep her looking normal. And she had her arm around me. I was holding on to it. She looks a little doubtful about the camera. And actually, this probably was in the middle of a conversation in which you were saying, Alan, take me home. And I wasn't in any position to take anybody home, trying to keep up a good face. So I think this photograph would probably be at the heart of Kaddish. And Louis reestablishing himself in Patterson, grimy apartment in Negro district, living in dark rooms, but found himself a girl he later married, falling in love again, though sere and shy, hurt with 20 years Naomi's mad idealism. Once I came home after a long time in New York with friends. He's lonely, sitting in the bedroom, he a desk chair, turned around to face me, wept, tears in red eyes under his eyeglasses, that we had left him. Jean gone strangely into the army, Naomi out on her own in New York, almost childish in her furnished room. So Louis walked downtown to post office to get mail, taught at high school, stayed at poetry desk, forlorn, ate grief at Bickford's. All those years are gone. Probably we're exactly the same, except that she was possessed by her anger and caught and trapped in a hell of anger and resentment. And I had a touch of the same, but saw it from the outside, maybe from her experience and example. I sort of took a hint from her not to get trapped. Like in Lear, no, that way lies madness. Naomi stared, and I gasped. She'd had a stroke, too thin, shrunk on her bones. Age come to Naomi, now broken into white hair, loose dress on her skeleton, face sunk, old, withered, cheek of crone, one hand stiff, heaviness of 40th years and menopause reduced by one heart stroke, lame now, wrinkles, a scar on her head, lobotomy, ruin, the hand dipping downwards to death. Oh, Russian-faced woman on the grass, your long black hair is crowned with flowers. The mandolin is on your knees. Communist beauty, sit here married in the summer among daisies, promised happiness at hand. Blessed daughter, come to America. I long to hear your voice again, remembering your mother's music in the song of the Natural Front. Back, you, Naomi, skull on you, gaunt immortality and revolution, come. Small, broken woman, the ashen indoor eyes of hospitals, ward grayness on skin. Are you a spy? I sat at the sour table, eyes filling with tears. Who are you? Did Louis send you? The wires in her hair, as she beat on her head. I'm not a bad girl. Don't murder me. I hear the ceiling. I raised 2 children. 2 years since I'd been there. I started to cry. She stared. Nurse broke up the meeting a moment. I went into the bathroom to hide. Against the toilet, white walls. The horror. I weeping to see her again. The horror. As if she were dead through funeral rotted. The horror. I came back, she yelled more, but they led her away. You're not Alan. I watched her face, but she passed by me, not looking. Opened the door to the ward. She went out without a glance back. Quiet, suddenly. I stared out. She looked old, the verge of the grave. All the horror. Another year, I left New York. On West Coast in Berkeley Cottage, dreamed of her soul, that through life, in what form it stood in that body, ashen or manic, gone beyond joy, near its death, with eyes. Returning from San Francisco one night, Orlovsky in my room, Whalen in his peaceful chair, a telegram from Jean. Naomi dead. Outside, I bent my head to the ground, under the bushes near the garage. Knew she was better, at last, not left to look on earth alone. 2 years of solitude. No one at age nearing 60. Old woman of skulls. Once long tressed Naomi a Bible. Or Ruth, who wept in America. Rebecca, aged in Newark. David, remembering his harp, now lawyer at Yale, or Svul Avram, Israel, Abraham, myself, to sing in the wilderness toward God, oh, Elohim. So, to the end, 2 days after her death, I got her letter. Strange prophecies anew. She wrote, the key is in the window. The key is in the sunlight at the window. I have the key. Get married, Alan. Don't take drugs. The key is in the bars, in the sunlight, in the window. Love, your mother, which is Naomi.
You couldn't have had the 60s without the 50s to make sort of a stupid, redundant point, but it is true. And I mean the 50s are the beats.
I think when people said, okay, I reject this and I reject this and I reject this, and oh, by the way, you know, and at that point came the 60s. And so the ground was really set in a way by the people who had helped us realize that we didn't have to follow what our elders told us.
But it all seemed like such a natural progression, you know, right from the Kerouac in the car, a small sedan, 6 people, to a bigger bunch of people. But it seemed like it was part of the same drama, and we had been accepted into it by the old gunfighters. You know, this is the real heavies in our mythologies. Kerouac, Cassidy, Ginsberg, and it was an honor.
I first met Alan when I was a rather straight Harvard professor. Alan wrote me a letter inquiring about our drug research, and I invited Alan and Peter to come up. And I had never met anyone like Alan and Peter. They were true bohemians in the classic sense of the word. And just to know Alan, to spend an hour with him, just changed my life right then. I knew that I was never going to be that part of the system after being exposed to the power of of a liberated Bohemian artistic mind.
And then Leary came down to New York to my apartment on East 2nd Street where I'd written Kaddish. Around that same time, when I was putting the manuscript together, Kerouac was visiting, and they all took psilocybin. I was sort of like the guide. And Jack got very high and very funny. And then Leary asked him what he thought about, I don't know, the vision of the cosmos or something on psychedelics. And Kerouac, the old Catholic, turned and said, walking on water wasn't built in a day, meaning the attainment of supreme reality, new vision, new illumination, new consciousness, the evolution of human consciousness, walking on water wasn't built in a day.
During the session, we sat down around the table, and Alan started spinning out his concern about the misuse of drugs in America and the need to have a positive approach, a spiritual approach to psychedelic drugs, and instigated in my mind basically the politics of ecstasy, the notion that we would have to go around the country turning on influential artists, writers, poets, philosophers, so that they could report back to us what they were getting from their brain-activated experiences, and then could pass on to the world the benefit of their trips.
We all had a party at the Hells Angels house. Most everybody there took LSD. We settled down to discussing the situation, discussing the images being set up against everybody and reinforced, and listening to Joan Baez records on the phonograph, and chanting Buddhist prayers. We were all awed by the communication between us that was possible, everybody able to drop their habitual image for the night and feel more common unity than conflict. The LSD was not the whole story. Our own efforts were part of the story. The goodwill of everybody was part of the story. And there was a desire for communion, and there was a fear of the endless isolation that all of us might have encountered. But LSD helped break down that fear barrier.
Alan is the most generous, compassionate, helpful person I've ever met. He's the cosmic public defender. He's the cosmic social worker. He's the cosmic sociologist.
I was in Cuba, and then Czechoslovakia, and then Russia, Poland, back to Czechoslovakia, and then I was busted by the Czechoslovakian security police and told that they had received complaints from parents, scientists, and educators that my presence was corrupting Czechoslovakian youth, and so my visa was discontinued. What was bothering them was that I was elected the King of May on May Day, and there was a great crowd there of 100,000 people that elected me. So I wrote a poem about the situation. I am the King of May, which is the power of sexual youth. And I am the King of May, which is industry in eloquence and action in amour. And I am the King of May, which is the long hair of Adam and the beard of my own body. And I am the King of May, which is Kral Mayalis in the Czechoslovakian tongue. And I am the King of May, which is old human poetry, and 100,000 people chose my name. And I am the King of May, and in a few minutes I will arrive at London Airport. And though I am the King of May, the Marxist bureaucrats have beat me upon the street, kept me up all night in police stations, followed me through springtime Prague, expelled me in secret from my kingdom by jet plane. Thus I have written this poem on a jet seat in mid-heaven. So I was expelled from Czechoslovakia and wound up at the Croydon Hotel visiting Dylan and meeting the Beatles for the first time and play the first scene in Don't Look Back. So this is a week before that filming of Dylan's first big tour to...
Essentially, the conflict now is not between left and right, or the rich and the poor, or even the blacks and the whites. It's the conflict between the uptight and the turned on. We're going to unleash the power of flowers.
Peace, P-E-A-C-E, P-E-A-C-E. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is
these people visiting the planet for the first and only time, checking out their impressions and exploring the psychic possibilities and exploring like what comradeship there was and what love there was, and to check out what other people's first impressions were on their one and only visit on the planet.
I loved what Alan did. I couldn't ohm and get naked on somebody's front lawn and get myself arrested. It wasn't my style, but I really admired that. It turned some people off naturally, but there was something sort of wonderfully liberating about it, and wonderfully liberating about him and his. You know what it was? I think it's because Alan could behave like a nut, but he was serious about something. He was serious about other people's lives. He was serious about ending the war in Vietnam. And Alan took risks and was serious, and at the same time was very colorful and very crazy, and we need that.
Mr. Allen Ginsberg became a success internationally after publishing Howl, and reached great critical acclaim with Kaddish, published in 1960. We are here to talk about the avant-garde. I should like to begin by asking Mr. Ginsberg whether he considers that the hippies are an intimation of the new order. Why don't I read a poem? I mean, sure, go ahead. A legal poem. Go ahead. Do you have one? A legal poem? Yes, I have one. An interesting project, which is a poem which I wrote on LSD. Under the influence? Under the influence of LSD. Whale's Visitation. White fog lifting and falling on the mountain brow. Trees moving in rivers of wind. The clouds arise as on a wave. Gigantic eddy lifting mist above teeming ferns, exquisitely swayed along a green crag glimpsed through mullioned glass in valley rain. Nice opening. All the valley quivered, one extended motion, wind undulating on mossy hills, a giant wash that sank white fog delicately down red runnels on the mountainside whose leaf branch tendrils moved a sway in granitic undertow down. No imperfection in the budded mountain. Valleys breathe, heaven and earth moving together. Daisies push inches of yellow air. Vegetables tremble. Green atoms shiver in grassy mandalas. Sheep speckle the mountainside, revolving their jaws with empty eyes. The great secret is no secret. My skull and Lord Hereford's knob equal all Albion one. I kind of like that. Amazing. Yeah. I think the primary hippie and beatnik originally, back 56 Kerouac Burroughs, perception was a recognition of that unity of being and a recognition of that great consciousness which we all were identical with, see? And that's what I think is the meaning of that flower power and, you know, like make love, not war. Ultimately, it's like it's grounded in an understanding of the nature of the universe and that you can't fight us. And the problem is seeing our unity, particularly black and white, particularly square and hippie, particularly police and student, particularly Birchite and faggot individualist. It's just that in politics you are a little bit naive.
We are going to Chicago, about 250,000 of young, energetic love buddies, to engage in a youth international party, sing in, grope in, love in the parks and streets of Chicago during the time that the Democrats will have their death convention.
My main recollection of Alan in Chicago is his prescience about it, because I saw him in New York. We had drinks about 6 months before. And he said, I don't like the idea of that convention in Chicago one bit. I really don't like it. I'm scared. And I was struck with that because Alan is not one to go around saying he's scared for too little.
The difficulty was that some of the people that were doing the organizing at that time were ultimately convinced that only through some kind of revolution would America ever change. And so the opening gambit for Chicago was a demonstration of karate and training people in karate.
Are you expecting trouble?
We expect to march.
Well, does
We expect trouble all the time.
There was the threat of violence from the police, and it was originally intended as a festival of life, as an alternative life convention and salvation of America.
But a consciousness which is really heightened is a consciousness which takes action.
My own feeling is I don't want to get my head busted in, and I don't want anybody who came knowing that I was coming here to have their head busted in. So I'm not going to march formally as a yippie. I'm going on the mobilization march as an individual, but not as a leader of yippies. And I don't know if I'll march from here if it looks like a bloodbath scene.
What I did was sit in the middle of Lincoln Park, where there's the threat of tear gas, and simply chant, somewhat naively, since I didn't have much training in chanting or any meditation practices that went along with it. But that mantra is sort of inviolable in itself, since in order to do it properly, you do have to relax your belly. You have to relax your body and dissolve all the anxiety, which would lead to aggression and fear and hostility and action of a violent nature.
And so I don't think there was anyone there at that convention who didn't seriously consider the possibility that he was going to get killed before it was over. It was scary. It was hairy. And Alan was a figure of calm during the convention. What I've always loved about Alan is precisely his bravery. That he's the perfect example of, in my mind, of courage transcending fear.
Well, Alan is a peacemaker, and Alan's views of Chicago and mine are different now, looking back. Don't forget, I was an activist working 24 hours a day.
The left was not able to lead the middle class out of the war because the left was too busy insulting Humphrey and insulting the middle class. So it was the fault of the left that Nixon got in because they didn't vote in 1968, because they were pissed off about their father figure, liberal Humphrey, not doing it the way they wanted to do it in their style. And Nixon squeaked in by 500,000 votes, and the war went on for another 6 years, with more murder and devastation than ever before. Kerouac's comment on our behavior at Chicago was, all they're doing is inventing new reasons for spitefulness. And the blood of the Vietnam War from Nixon years on, it rests equally on the hands of the left and the right. And Kerouac zeroed right in on it, said new reasons for spitefulness.
Jack Kerouac, the novelist who wrote On the Road, reached the end of it today. The 47-year-old spokesman for the Beat Generation died of a massive hemorrhage in a St. Petersburg, Florida hospital. Kerouac's books, selling millions of copies, translated into 18 languages, were regarded as a bridge between older bohemian movements and today's hippies.
Kerouac's obituary conserves Time's front paragraphs. Jack saw sunset red over Hudson horizon 2-3 decades back. Northport in the trees, Jack drank rot gut and made haiku of birds tweedling on his porch rail at dawn. Fell down and saw death's golden light in Florida garden a decade ago. Now taken utterly, soul upward and body down in wood coffin and concrete slab box. I threw a kissed handful of damp earth down on the stone lid and sighed. Well, while I'm here, I'll do the work. And what's the work? To ease the pain of living. Everything else, drunken dumb show.
What Buddhism has been useful for, especially since Kerouac picked up on it and transmitted it to me, at least, back in the 50s, was that recognition of transitoriness, which Kerouac articulated really beautifully in his poetry and in his novels. So what Buddhism is done is given a method for interrupting the mind and opening it up, and teach insight. I met Rinpoche Chogyam Trungpa on a street corner in New York with my father by accident, way back in 1970. And then I came here to Boulder, and he invited me to teach poetry and meditation. And he said that for his Buddhist meditators to be able to speak about liberation of mind to America, they would have to be poets. And his specialty is calligraphy and poetry and dance and meditation practice. And so I've been here studying with Trungpa Rinpoche, and he asked me to take responsibility with Ann Waldman, a poet, to organize a school of poetry so that the meditators would develop golden mouths, and the golden-mouthed poets would develop golden, quiet, open minds. It's called the Jack Kerouac School because Kerouac was the American sort of master of spontaneous babbling, poetry, ditties, spontaneous sublimity.
The poetry comes from an expression of one's phenomenal world in the written form. It could be either prose or poetry form. It's not so much from a Buddhist point of view, is that you write good poetry particularly, but how your thought patterns become elegant. That you see a phenomenal world as a process.
The idea was not just a Kerouacian idea, it's an old Buddhist idea too. The idea of spontaneous mind, of first thought is best thought. And insights into like how you put one word next to another to make it jump and make a little firecracker, like fried shoes, dandelion telephones, hydrogen jukebox. The Rocky Flats nuclear facility where Peter Orlovsky and I were busted with Daniel Ellsberg and 100 other people this summer for sitting in meditation blocking a railroad trains carrying plutonium waste will be the subject of a trial with Ellsberg, Ginsberg, Orlovsky, and many others in Boulder, Colorado, in which we'll test the local law, which says you have a right to commit a misdemeanor to prevent a larger catastrophe. So we committed the misdemeanor of sitting in meditation on the railroad tracks to waken public consciousness to the great plutonian shade hovering over the civilization. This poem was written the night before, unprepared, that is, I just gotten inspired and stayed up all night and written a poem. And then one of the members of the Rocky Flats Truth Force came in at 11 in the morning and said, there's a train coming through, you want to go out and get busted? And I said, I'm ready. I got my script. So, Plutonian Ode.
Judgment of judgments and presidents, vengeful nations and capital politics, civilization stupidly industrious, multitudes learned or illiterate, manufactured specter of human reason. Oh, solidified imago of practitioners in the black arts, I dare your reality. I challenge your very being. I publish your cause and effect. I turn the wheel of mind on your 300 tons and cast the spell of destiny that covers your dread tomb, prophetic with emptiness. Oh, doomed plutonium.
Ellsberg and Ginsberg taken in the gray-haired sheriff's van. What about Einstein? What about Einstein? I said, what about Einstein? Hey, Einstein, come back here.
Be welcome, please, Allen Ginsberg. Allen, people talk about you, I think of the last three things I've read about you, they've begun by saying it's a mellower Ginsberg that you meet today, or Ginsberg has mellowed. Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, my father died this last 76, and I wrote a series of poems while he was alive. We were taking care of him.
While he was dying?
Yeah, while he was dying this last year, and then after he died. Yeah. I was taking care of him at home often with Peter Orlovsky, my boyfriend, and we had to dress my father because he was very weak and fragile and lethargic. Not in pain, though. Philosophic, read him poetry. And he was sitting on the bed, slumped over one day, and looked up at Peter with a rueful smile and said, don't ever grow old. So this is a series of poems called Don't Grow Old. Old poet, poetry's final subject glimmers months ahead. Tender mornings, Patterson roofs snow-covered, vast sky over City Hall, East Side parks, grass terraces, and tennis courts beside the Passaic River, parts of ourselves long gone. Sister Rose's apartments, brown corridored high schools, too tired to go out for a walk, too tired to end the war, too tired to save body, too tired to be heroic. The real close at hand is the stomach, liver, pancreas, rib, coughing up gastric saliva. Marriages vanished in a cough. Hard to get up from the easy chair, hands white, feet speckled, a blue toe, stomach big, breasts hanging thin, hair white on the chest. Too tired to take off shoes and black socks. Wasted arms, feeble knees, 80 years old, hair thin and white, cheek bonier than I'd remembered, head bowed on his neck, eyes opened now and then. He listened. I read my father Wordsworth's Intimations of Immortality. Trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. That's beautiful, he said, but it's not true. When I was a boy, we had a house on Boyd Street, Newark, he continued. The backyard was a big, empty lot full of bushes and tall grass. I always wondered what was behind those trees. When I grew older, I walked around the block and found out what was back there. It was a glue factory.
Louis and Alan always got along very well. They fought because they had different theories about their writing, and each one was stubborn about it, and they stuck to their guns about it. They would raise their hands and they would have big fights, but they would wind up with their arms around one another. They were proud of one another. They were affectionate to one another. They went out on readings together. Alan was a good son.
I like to call my father back and maybe trade poems a little bit now for toward the end. Lou, can you read more?
One more poem called At the Grave of My Father. Though I am often far away, yet I am ever near your grave. Speech filters all I have to say, but years are all too few to save. For with myself less busy now, I hear more clear your tender tones. Mercy is flowing from your brow. Forgiveness streams up from your bones, returning with what I should have done, the love I bore you in your heart. So take this tribute from your son.
Alan, we notified Alan of his father's death. At that time, he was out in Boulder. He came post-haste. He wrote Father Death on the plane coming into New York. I read it several times at first. I couldn't read it. I couldn't get farther than the first 2 or 3 lines. It affected me too much emotionally. It took about a month or 2 till I was really able to appreciate it, to know how good it was. It's amazing that anyone could just sit and release his emotions and his feelings riding along that way, on the way.
Hey, Father Death, I'm flying home. Hey, poor man, you're all alone. Hey, old daddy, I know where I'm going. Old Auntie Death, don't hide your bones. Old Uncle Death, I hear your groans. Oh, Sister Death, how sweet your moans. Guru Death, your words are true. Teacher Death, I do thank you for inspiring me to sing this blues. Father Breath, once more farewell. Birth you gave was no thing ill. My heart is still as time will tell. Father Breath, once more farewell. Birth you gave was no thing ill. My heart is still as time will tell.
He would come and they would talk. They would talk about death. They would talk about eternity. And he was very proud of Alan. Alan was very tender to him at the last. He always was anyway, but he was there a lot. All I can say is that I think Louis died a happy man in all ways.
Broken bone, 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 all over the ground. Broken bone, 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 everywhere the sound of broken bone.
If I know, if I have it, so.
Could I ask?
Bob Rosenthal knows.
Okay.
Are
Am I
you-
really?
are you-
Oh, no, I'm going to be a customer. It's to Marshall.
At 66, just learning how to take care of my body, to wake cheerful 8 a.m. and write in a notebook, distinguished professor of English at Brooklyn College, collected poems on the shelf, first book of photographs completed, more to come, dreaming of operas and poetry jazz. Now to rise from bedside naked, check blood sugar, sit solitary by the sink a moment, happy not yet to be a corpse. I'm an amateur snapshot cat, or an amateur shutterbug. I had a camera I bought on 3rd Avenue for 13 bucks, a Kodak Retina, back in 1952 or so. And I began taking pictures more or less regularly, but not so often, and got them developed in a drugstore in the Lower East Side on Avenue A across from Tompkins Park. And it was sort of intuitive dallying around. I didn't think of them as photography. I just thought of them as family snapshots or getting images of my friends that I would cherish while they were young and beautiful, really. In fact, after all, Kerouac had already been writing novels in which he was using me and Hunky and Burroughs as characters. So there was all this awareness of each other as personages in the sacred drama of each other's lives. So among them, among the earliest and almost unself-conscious, probably September 1953. So we went out on the fire escape, and Jack was just looking, and I had my camera, and he was musing, and he wasn't particularly posing, and I just took a picture. Then up to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Here in the Egyptian Ring, William Burroughs with a brother, Sphinx, fall, 1953, Manhattan. They got the same nose and the same jaw, practically, and the same eyes, and practically the same haircut, same paws, pausing together. And here is an old acquaintance of the mid-40s, Herbert E. Hunky, his room in the Hotel Elite, which then was on the northeast corner of 8th Avenue and 51st Street, at that time diagonally opposite what was Madison Square Garden in the fall of 1953. Gregory Corso. Here he's looking at the skylight window, eating grapes, Paris. A tiny little attic room, not much bigger than, narrow as a hall. And there's a real interesting picture of Peter Orlovsky's family. So this is Peter, and here's his brother Lafcadio, now aged 54 or 55. Catherine Orlovsky, age 78, totally deaf, after a botched mastoid nerve operation in the Eye and Ear Hospital in New York circa 1930. And Lafcadio's twin sister, Marie, who lived in our Lower East Side apartment, but quit job soon after, angry, hearing voices, filthy gossip about her. That look in Lafcadio's eye is amazing. Who is he? What is he thinking now? When you compare him to that innocent 16-year-old kid. So I guess what's interesting about these snapshots is they followed people through the whole span of half their lives. From Peter's, melancholy musing to the same sad face of years later here. So that's the burden that Peter bears. to have responsibility to help out these injured, wounded elders, grown old. Well, at this time in the early 90s, Peter is moving from a halfway house after a long residence in Bellevue and halfway houses, recovered from alcoholism, I think, pretty nearly over the hump, I think, finally. Somewhat slowed down and older, because he's battered himself around quite a bit, and has a residence place of his own. And City Lights has asked for a Peter Orlovsky reader, and we're putting together an album of his songs from studio recordings we made and from performances. I've had to go to Hazelton, the Mother Hospital, for AA to get training in family codependency and find out how to distance myself and at the same time be supportive. But it's very difficult because the bond between us is so deep. I think his dependency on me and mine on him is very old, and we did make a vow to go to heaven together. So it's hard to break a vow. I think my own sense of, if you could call it survival, left a lot of soul damage. Because the thing about Gregory, Jack, and Peter is that they're all very, very sensitive and hypersensitive and subject to enormous depressions and enormous impressions of sensations. Whereas I've had sort of almost like a screen built so that I could hear people dying and get on with it. You know, that I could survive without tears in a sense, or that the tears would come out in a poem later, rather than an immediate breakup of my world. My world already was broken up long ago. Okay, so we'll close this book. So farewell to all the sacred characters for the time being.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
It's 2 a.m. and I got to get up early and taxi 20 miles to satisfy my ambition. How'd I get into this fix, this workaholic showbiz meditation market? If I had a soul, I sold it for pretty words. If I had a body, I used it up, spurting my essence. If I had a mind, it got covered with love. If I had a spirit, I forgot when I was breathing. If I had speech, it was all a boast. If I had desire, it went out my anus. If I had ambitions to be liberated, how'd I get into this wrinkled person? With pretty words, love essences, breathing boasts, anal longings, famous crimes? What a mess I am, Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, Allen Ginsberg, see what you have done. C.C. Allen, see what you have done. You have taken us in from many worlds, and you made us all as one.
I had my chance and lost it. Many chances, didn't take them seriously enough. Oh yes, I was impressed, almost went mad with fear. I'll lose the immortal chance. One, lost it. Allen Ginsberg warns you, don't follow my path to extinction.
Father, breath, once more, farewell. Birth you gave was no thing ill. My heart is still as time will tell. I dreamed I dwelled in a homeless place where I was was lost alone. Folk looked right through me into space and passed with eyes of stone. Homeless and on many a street, accept this change from me. A friendly smile or a word is sweet as fearless charity. So rich or poor, no gold to talk, a smile on your face. The homeless ones where you may walk receive amazing grace. I dreamed I dwelled in a homeless place where I was lost alone. Folk looked right through me into space and passed with eyes of stone.